With nearly 2 decades of experience serving underserved communities, she has helped drive innovative strategies that connect economic growth with innovative strategies and opportunities and inclusion for New York. Please help me welcome Sheila Ray.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. I'll be brief, I promise. I really want to thank Sharon, and I also want to thank Christy Wallace, the Women Creating Change team, and my very own team, Women.NYC, for partnering to bring together civic leaders, entrepreneurs, advocates, as well as business leaders as a whole. I also want to acknowledge very deeply our city partners and elected officials taking the time to join us today in our conversations. I want to thank Barnard for hosting this symposium. The college is a symbol of progress. It includes intellectual women driving change, leading thought and innovation, and really centers on people who are daring to make a change in this political climate and the educational climate as well to ensure that we're expanding equality and opportunity. At EDC, we strive to support equitable economic development and growth. We do that through offering affordable housing, building sustainable infrastructure, creating pipelines for innovative industries, so jobs of the future, and ensuring that economic mobility access is available to all New Yorkers at all levels through education, through training, job placement, policy change, and support for small business and diverse entrepreneurs. Today, 62% of New Yorkers cannot afford the true cost of living. Economic justice is about confronting the systems and the issues within those systems, not only trying to put a Band-Aid on the after effect of our development. Mayor Mamdani has been clear. We need to use every tool we have to ease the burden of working people. This is why he appointed the first deputy mayor of economic justice, Julie Su, a champion of working people. The deputy mayor has made it a priority to address the affordability crisis in our city. EDC now sits within the deputy mayor's portfolio, and economic justice is the next phase in deepening our commitment. It's a real opportunity to align economic development with affordability, workforce access, and overall equitable development. Economic justice and growth are how we ensure that our city remains competitive and productive. It's why the administration is expanding childcare, removing barriers to opportunities so parents and mothers can stay in their jobs, that they can develop businesses, and can attract and retain talent. It's why we're fighting for affordability, delivering public goods like our public groceries, and making sure that this is a city that people can raise their families in, that they can retire in, and not have to face, as was mentioned before, a deep drop in their income, leading to poverty. Another great example of this work is with my very own team at Women.NYC, where we seek to build mobility and opportunity for women in the workforce. Our team launched 3 years ago, and since then we've reached over 180,000 people. We've supported nearly 6,000 participants with a 66% rate of job seekers, not only increasing their employment and their salaries, but also being able to level up and transition from employees to entrepreneurs. Our entrepreneurs in our accelerator program that run their own business have reported a 30% growth in revenue, with 90% of our Women.NYC participants being women of color. All of our work is rooted in the belief that working people who shape our city deserve their fair share, that we can lift up underserved communities. Expanding opportunity and addressing the affordable crisis in New York City requires ambition. We need to think bigger, bolder. We need to think about policy change and making sure that we're not just accepting performative shows of change, but that we're holding the systems accountable, our electeds accountable, our leaders accountable, and making sure that our tax dollars are actually going back to the individuals that are working, and particularly women. That's the real investment that we need to make today. It is my pleasure to introduce someone who has fought for equity and diversity in education for decades. An advocate and scholar dedicated to advancing opportunity for women, Barnard's first ever and very own Vice President of Inclusion and Belonging, Dr. Ethel Rosado.
Good morning. Ooh, y'all are awake now. Yes. Okay. So, good morning. I'm happy to welcome you to Barnard. I want to thank Sharon Swell Fairman, Dr. Mary Rocco, Women Creating Change, Women.NYC for the privilege of greeting you today and welcoming you to our campus. Rethinking affordability. I want to start with that word, rethinking. Not revisiting, not refining, rethinking. Rethinking is not iteration, it's interrogation. It means going back to the assumption underneath the policy, not just the policy itself. Revisiting will ask, what did we do? Rethinking asks us, what did we believe that made us do it? Rethinking. Say it with me. Yes. Glad you're awake. Rethinking, that's a harder task, actually. Rethinking means that we've accepted that what we've been doing may not fit in today's context. As an organization that was founded in 1915 by women who understood that a vote without economic power was a hollow victory, WCC has never been afraid to say the quiet part out loud. And it has long argued that women's economic stability is essential infrastructure for a thriving city. I want to push that one step further. Infrastructure is also a belonging question. Who do we maintain? Who do we let crumble? Here's what I believe. Affordability is not a policy problem. It's a belonging problem. Policy can lower a number, only belonging asks who gets to stay and design systems accordingly. When women and gender inclusive New Yorkers are fully integrated into the economic life of the city, we move closer to belonging and a step closer to justice. Rethinking. Who counts? Whose labor is valued? The childcare worker and the CEO? Whose stability matters enough to protect? Those are belonging questions. And they are the questions that this convening is asking us to sit with. Now, I'm going to give some historical context. One of WCC's early members was Virginia Gildersleeve, who was the dean of Barnard College, where I now serve as the VP for Inclusion and Belonging. A complicated inheritance for sure, which is the only kind worth analysis and rethinking. Patricia Hill Collins, writing about standpoint Black women inside white-dominated institutions, called it the outsider within. The frame extends to anyone who lives and works inside of systems that were never designed to hold them. So that is our position, and that is also our power. Women's leadership and women's economic security have never been separate issues. I want to be clear. They are the same issue. They have always been the same issue. So the expertise in this room today is not only professional, it's personal. You're not just policymakers, advocates, entrepreneurs, funders. You're the ones existing in the systems that we're trying to change. That's not a complication. That is our clear source of authority. Economic mobility is the question today's panels are built to answer. Belonging is the prior question that decides whose mobility we are designing for. And every topic on today's agenda, from housing to caregiving, accountability to AI, is one of its chapters that you are all helping to write. So let's use that expertise. I want to thank you again to Women Creating Change, Women.NYC, for making this convening possible. It is important work that you're doing. And obviously, Barnard is very happy to have the privilege of hosting you. So welcome to Rethinking Affordability, Economic Justice, Work, and the Future of Opportunity. I'm so glad that you are here. Now, before we get to work, there's a lot of work to do today. But before we get there, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Tara Garner, a junior and a rising senior who studies sociology and human rights here at Barnard. Tara's research as a Laidlaw scholar explores the relationship between financial literacy and college attainment. She currently serves as the director of financial education at College for All, a nonprofit that provides resources to underserved high school students and reaches over 15,000 students worldwide. She is the Spring 2026 recipient of the Rising Star Leadership Award at Barnard and was previously nominated for the Truman Scholarship by the institution. So it gives me great pleasure to welcome one of our own, Tara Garner.
Thank you, Vice President Rosado, for introducing me, and good morning, everyone. Thank you so much to Dr. Mary Rocco for inviting me to speak, and to WCC, Women.NYC, and Barnard's Office of Community Engagement and Inclusion for putting on such a special event dedicated to advancing futures that look like the one that I was able to grow into while being a member of this institution. There have been many firsts in my life. I'm a first-generation college student, and I was a part of my high school's first graduating class. But being first also meant navigating systems none of us had been taught how to understand. When people talk about economic injustice, they usually talk about numbers, income levels, tuition costs, debt. But I think some of the most powerful forms of inequality are much quieter than that. Sometimes injustice looks like a student opening a financial aid portal and having absolutely no idea what they're looking at. I know because that student was me. I'm Tara Garner, a junior at Barnard, studying sociology and human rights. Wait, sorry. And being a part of my high school's first graduating class and being a first generation student sounds exciting, and it is, but it also means many of us were navigating college completely blind. I watched classmates turn down opportunities they thought they couldn't afford. Not because they weren't qualified, not because they weren't ambitious, but because nobody had taught us how these systems worked. At 17, one of my dream schools accepted me, but the financial aid package made it impossible to attend. Or at least that's what I thought. I remember staring at my screen, feeling embarrassed for even wanting more, like asking for help somehow meant that I was ungrateful. But eventually, I appealed the decision anyway. A few weeks later, they gave me another $5,000. And honestly, the amount almost mattered less than what it represented. Because suddenly, I realized, wait, how many students are walking away from opportunities simply because nobody told them they were allowed to ask for them? That question changed my life. I shared my appeal letter online, thinking that maybe a few people would see it. Instead, it spread to over 1 million students. My inbox is filled with messages from people asking questions I had once Googled alone at 2 a.m. That became Danalyze, an initiative I founded to help students navigate financial aid and college readiness, which often feel intentionally difficult to understand. But more than anything, my work is about translation. I learned to advocate before I even knew what advocacy was. As the sister of a nonverbal autistic brother, I spent years in meetings with school administrators and specialists, learning to navigate rooms that were not designed for us. I learned how to frame arguments so they would be heard, how to push without being dismissed, and how to insist on dignity where it was often overlooked. I understood early that waiting for institutions to notice you was its own kind of loss. These rooms showed me how systems work from the inside, not as abstraction, but as people, incentives, constraints, and all the things that get lost in translation, especially for those who can't advocate for themselves. Translating institutions, translating policy, translating the hidden rules that determine who gets access to opportunity and who doesn't. That's what motivated me to turn my experiences into civic action. Through my published Laidlaw research, which highlights the relationship between financial literacy and college attainment, showing for the first time in the field that access to financial education correlates with higher educational attainment. To becoming the director of financial education at College for All, where I create financial education programming that's currently being disseminated to over 15,000 individuals, and where I mentor around 80 students individually, helping young people make informed decisions about college, debt, savings, and what it means to work work toward long-term financial stability. My motivation to act wasn't because I thought I could fix everything, but because I knew what it felt like to believe a closed door was permanent, when in reality, nobody had shown me where that handle was. If you take away anything from my speech and testimony today, I hope it's this. Civic action is not just about individual effort, but about what becomes possible when we come together and collectively create a world better than the one that we inherited. And if we truly believe in that kind of collective change, then our approach to economic empowerment has to change too. Policy recommendations can't begin and end solely at institutions. We can't keep designing programs for students and individuals without including them in the process and the conversation. The young people who are living these experiences are often the best equipped to explain what support they need. And as a young woman, I've learned how difficult it can be to navigate systems and leadership spaces without access to the same information, mentorship, or support networks as others. If we want meaningful economic empowerment in New York City, we must be willing to meet people where they are and include them in the conversations. Because talent is everywhere, access is not. Thank you.
Thank you, Tara, for sharing your story and grounding today's conversations in the real realities that New Yorkers are facing. I do want to say that one of the most important things that we can do at gatherings like this is to marry the economic data and the discussions that we're having in these conversations with the actual realities that New Yorkers are experiencing in their daily lives. I'm very excited to be here this morning. So good morning, everyone. Good morning. My name is Lori Rodney. I'm the Global Head of Communications at Shutterstock, and I am also a proud board member for WCC. I'm going to, thank you all. I'm going to be helping to guide the program today. So with that, I'd like us to get started with our first panel discussion. Our first panel is Shaping the Future of Affordability in NYC, Stability, Growth, and Opportunity. This discussion will explore how housing, caregiving, workforce participation, and economic development intersect, and what it will take to create a more equitable and sustainable future for New Yorkers. Please welcome our panelists and our first panel moderator, Beverly Cooper Newfield, President of Power New York. Please join me in welcoming them to the stage.
Good morning. Good morning. Can you hear me? Great. Well, that was a wonderful beginning, really inspiring to hear from young women and also leaders of our city. So thank you very much for that. Thank you also to WCC for putting this together. It's such an important conversation. I'm Bev Neufeld, founder and president of Power New York and the co-chair of the Equal Pay Campaign of New York. So that's that's what I'd like to bring a little bit to the conversation today. We have an amazing panel, as you can see. So we want to get started. We have a lot to talk about. Let me introduce first. We have Rachel Fee, and Sadia Sherman, who's now you're doing planning, head of the planning department. We have Dr. Lisa, I'm sorry, give me 1 second here. We got a little bit of turn around. Okay. I was really worried about doing this. We have Dr. Lisa Scott McKenzie, Commissioner of the Department for the Aging. And we have Young Lee, Chief Strategy Officer of Living Cities. So we have really quite a diverse group here. And we're going to dig right into it. Affordability, affordable housing has been one of the major issues that New York City is tackling. So, Rachel, tell us a little bit about the affordability situation in New York City, and then also about that interesting study that you've done about evictions. Thank you.
No. Now?
Yeah.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. Pleased to be here today. And so glad that this group is talking about affordability and using the word rethinking, which I love and feel very inspired by. And also the systems change and how difficult some of those systems are to navigate. So pleased to be here. When I think about New York City's affordability crisis, when I'm in an audience like this, I feel like nobody needs me to give the stats. Like everybody feels it in New York. It affects our friends, our families. We're all thinking about it in our daily lives of how to plan for our future and what does living in New York look like when it is so hard and the rents are so high. So I think about addressing solutions in kind of three buckets. One is adding more supply, especially affordable housing that's truly affordable. The second is preserving the affordable housing that we have. That has been, I think, a growing issue, whether it's income restricted affordable housing, whether it's NYCHA's public housing, or the rent stabilized stock we have that provides affordability to thousands of households. And then the last bucket I think about, which is a really critical part of the solution, is assistance for the lowest income renters, because they just never can afford market rents, right? The rents are high. There is such a tight housing market. And if you're on a fixed income in New York, if you are a low wage earner, you really do need additional supports to live a stable life and afford all your other basic needs. So as an affordable housing advocate, I started thinking a lot about this question of preservation first. We're seeing a lot of distress in the affordable housing stock where rent collection is not covering growing costs. So, if your affordable housing operator can't pay their bills, like that you could be in trouble. So we started looking at what's going on with rent collection. And for about 90% of renters in affordable housing, it is doing what it's supposed to do. It is a launch pad for your life, right? To afford all your other basic needs. But for about 10% of renters in affordable housing, we're seeing that they're falling behind in rent. And when you are a low income renter, I think affording rent is just affording your life. It's childcare, it's cost of living increases, it's transportation, it's any emergency that can put you behind a month in rent. So we started to look at solutions around this. And what we're advocating for the city, because we studied this and found with NYU Furman Center that 1/3 of eviction filings in New York City are in affordable housing. So that household has income qualified. They got into the housing through the housing lottery or a homeless set-aside unit, and they came in affording it, but then they're falling behind. So thinking about, some of our solutions, that's 38,000 households a year with eviction filings for non-payment in affordable housing. So we're looking for two things from the city, and we've gotten a lot of engagement on this, and I'm feeling really hopeful that we are looking at some system change. But part of this is upstream solutions, dealing with this problem earlier. So New York City Human Resources Administration, HRA, has a program that does help with rent arrears. But because of processing backlogs, because of lack of staff capacity, you can really only access help in housing court. I'm like, why are we structuring a program like that? We analyzed how much affordable housing operators are spending on legal fees. They don't want to evict that person. They want them to get help with the back rent and stay stably housed. It's about $39 million annually.
Lisa, thank you so much for that explanation. It really centers one of the biggest expenses that New Yorkers have. Let's look at how that affects a particular group, though. And I'm going to ask Dr. Scott McKenzie to please talk about the aging community, older New Yorkers. What are they dealing with, and how can we make that easier for them? So thank you. Mm-hmm.
Sorry. Good morning, everyone. And thank you for this really wonderful forum and the opportunity to rethink affordability. And I have to say, what a great time for us to actually look at affordability as a whole again, because we have a mayor that really has squarely focused on this as an issue. So at New York City Aging, we have realigned our vision as well, because we recognize that although ageism is still a problem, and we still have done a lot of baseline work on this, and we'll continue to our efforts in that area. Really, what older adults are dealing with right now are the meat and potato issues of food insecurity, affordable housing, access to quality healthcare, and safety. So we've realigned our vision to be able to support efforts in those areas so that we can provide a real future that can be built here in New York. When I spoke with Ms. Sewell Farrell earlier today, and I'm sorry if I'm butchering your name, we talked about some of the older adults that actually are fearful of aging or retiring into poverty. And that's born out of a need, basically, for older New Yorkers to have supplemental income, even if they retire. You know, they need supplemental income for their retirement savings or for their pension or for Social Security. However, we don't support employment or flexible work options for older New Yorkers. So there aren't many opportunities. And still there's some age discrimination that has to be dealt with as well. So we really need to tackle these types of issues in order for older adults here in New York City to actually stay here, or for their families to be able to afford to stay here so they have the social supports that they need.
Thank you so much for that. So the city is really tackling the issue, and we are lucky enough, to have the person who's actually the head of city planning with us. Sadia, can you talk about we want more housing, but we want it to be affordable. How do you manage those two different goals?
Great, thank you. And thank you for having me, and really, really glad to be here and discuss this topic. Just to give some framing, and I think, I don't know if Shahelia is still in the room, but I think she mentioned it in her remarks, that our city is obviously suffering with an affordability crisis. And I don't know if folks are aware, but recently the mayor released the city's first true cost of living measure. And I see my colleague Shahab, who worked on that, in the audience. And I had an opportunity to work on that in my former role as the city's chief equity officer. But it's a measure of what it costs to live in our city with dignity. And I think that's important because when we talk about affordability, we're not just talking about what it costs to get by in our city, but what it costs to thrive and to live with dignity in New York City. And what that report tells us is that 62% of New Yorkers don't meet the true cost of living. And that means what it takes to take care of yourself, but also to be able to have fun, to plan for your future, right? And to be able to live with dignity across our city. And we see that obviously more pronounced across racial categories and across counties, with the Bronx being the county in the borough where we see folks who are struggling the most to meet the cost of living. And two of the major drivers of costs are childcare, which has obviously been a priority for this administration, and housing, also a priority for this administration. And so we're laser focused on the issues that are impacting the day-to-day quality of life of New Yorkers. In my new role at city planning, we have a really great opportunity to focus on one piece of the housing puzzle, which was shared, which is supply. Our city right now is dealing with a severe housing crisis, and it's been the case for quite some time. We have a 1.4% vacancy rate in New York City, and we have not built housing at a pace, right, that has kept up with our population growth. And so what that means is what we've all been experiencing. People are rent burdened, folks have been displaced, people are experiencing homelessness because we're living in a city with severe housing scarcity. Not only does that drive up costs for New Yorkers, but that also has the impact of baking in inequities when we're in an environment with incredible scarcity. And so there was a time when supply and affordability were sort of seen at odds with one another. But I think that the sentiment has shifted over the past 5 or so years to understand that the two work in concert. It's critical that we're growing our overall housing supply and creating some relief in the market for renters so that also there's more choice and there's more competition for renters in the market. At the same time, it's crucial that we as the city are using the tools that we have to create income restricted housing so that we have permanently affordable housing in our city. And so the ways that we're doing that at city planning, in the last administration, there was a lot of work that went ahead to pass City of Yes, which is really one of the most comprehensive updates to our city's zoning text, which really allowed, New Yorkers across the city to build a little bit more housing everywhere. This is everything from accessory dwelling units and single family homes to modest, 3 or 4 story buildings in places where they had been previously prohibited. We project that will help create about 82,000 units of housing over the next 15 years. Additionally, the mayor has made a commitment to try to develop at least 200,000 affordable units across our city. And the work that we're doing at the city planning department is using tools like zoning to do so. So the city has a tool called mandatory inclusionary housing. And this means that when a developer is working to, or we're rezoning a significant area, there's a requirement for 25% affordable housing. And typically this is about 40 to 60% of the AMI. So those can be individuals who are around 47,000 or so at the lower end to, well over 6 figures when we get to moderate income housing. This is critical, and we're already seeing some of the impacts of this in neighborhoods like Gowanus, in neighborhoods like Soho, which now has mandatory inclusionary housing. And this will be an important tool as we pursue our work. Some of the other work that we're doing is really working to also speed up housing development in New York City. There were a number of charter amendments that were passed in the last election, which allow us to pursue processes such as green fast track housing or the affordable fast track housing or ELRP versus ULRP, a lot of acronyms. But the goal is to try to speed up the development of housing because we also know that time is money. And when we are going through 2, 3 multi-year processes to develop housing, costs increase over time. And particularly in the world of affordable housing, when margins are really slim, it's important that we're doing our best to help affordable housing developers build as fast as they can. And so that's some of the work that we have underway, and excited to talk about it more.
That is a perfect segue to our next speaker. Myung, you are with an organization that brings together, the private sector and the public sector. You've seen so many of the models, in terms of housing. Can you talk to us about some of the inequities that are being reinforced, by things that we think are working, right? And how do we change that?
Sure. Thank you. It's so much fun to be here to nerd out about affordability. So I have lots of information here, but then I was told I have 3 minutes. So I'm going to try to go ahead and rush through. So the system is designed and it's working as it was designed, which is the problem. So I'm going to start there. So if you think about affordability and housing, one of the things that you have to think about is that in order to get into housing, you need to have a mortgage. And in order to get that mortgage, you need to have credit. And so let's talk about credit. Credit scores were developed, and sorry if it's going to be boring, but I'll try to make it interesting. Credit scores were developed because they were supposed to take care of the problem of having to sit down in front of this loan officer, who was usually a white man, sitting there, and he was going to decide whether or not you were credit worthy, whether they can trust you and trust you to come back and pay the money. So the credit scores were supposed to replace that, and they were supposed to fix it, and they were supposed to come up with a better system. But instead, all that it did was to put a number on it, and they called it science. So now it becomes even harder to fix it, because now they've said, oh no, but it's now a number and it's science, and so it's not bias. But if you think about what a credit score is actually measuring, it is measuring your payment history on credit cards, which you need a credit score to get, right? Credit cards, how much debt you have, how much more debt you can take on, et cetera. And all of that assumes that you were already inside the system that they're measuring you against. The problem is the system was designed to keep many of us out of that system. So it wasn't until 1974 when women were actually allowed to get credit cards in our own name without having to have a man sign and co-sign for that. Think about it, 1974. I think I'm safe to say almost everybody in this room was alive at that time. Well, maybe not all of us, because here I am, I'm in college. But I mean, you know people that were who couldn't get credit cards, right? 1974. And then if you, and some of the questions that they would ask you, like, and that's if you were married. And so you got your credit card in your husband's name. And if you were single, you had to get your brother or your dad to sign for you, if they would even give you that. And if you were working, they didn't care because they thought you would get pregnant. So they wanted you to sometimes even bring along letters to say that you were on birth control so that they can make sure that you weren't going to quit your job once you had your baby and then not be able to pay that back. Think about that. So that was the system that was created that they are now using to put numbers behind it and say, here's how we're going to measure your credit worthiness. So that is something that we have to fix. And if you add race and ethnicity and all of the other intersectionalities to it, it gets even worse. So at Living Cities, what we're trying to do is to think about how do we rewire how capital is flowing so that it gets to the people that it should get to, because we fundamentally believe that the economy is only as strong as everybody in it being able to participate. And especially if you think about the fact that by the year 2045, this country is going to look mostly like people that are now called minorities, right? It's not going to be a majority white country anymore. It is going to be much like what New York City already looks like, which is that it's majority minority. And if you keep most of us out of that economy, then what does it do to the economy as a whole? So think about that as you go through the affordability conversation. So what we need to do is to create a new system. What would that look like? How do we create a system that allows us to really go ahead and participate? And this is where the rethinking comes in. We can't just tinker around the edges. Tinkering around the edges, absolutely necessary, because people are still here right now and they need to get into housing. They need to be able to go and get a job, all of that. So we need all of those solutions to deal with the issues now. However, we also need a bunch of us to be thinking about what else could we build. And one example that I can give you is like Grameen America, which is Grameen America is an organization that took small businesses, like micro businesses. We're talking about women up in the Bronx who are pushing shopping carts around, food carts, and trying to sell that. Think about those vendors and the loan that they need. And what they did was to take 5 of those women together as a group and said, okay, you guys know each other, you trust each other. We don't need collaterals. We don't need your credit history. We're going to go ahead and let you all make decisions as a group about how this money gets spent. And so they make loans, and and I have this number because I don't want to get it wrong. Since 2008, they invested over $4 billion in more than 190,000 low-income women entrepreneurs. And the repayment rate is 98.8%.
That's amazing.
So we know we can do it.
Yeah.
We know that a new system can be built to see people like us, to be able to say, how can we build a system that works for people that are left out of the system?
Thank you.
And I think that's what we really need to do.
Thank you, Mian. That is so heartening to know that there are already models out there. It's actually Muhammad Yunus started this in Bangladesh. And it was really fascinating, to see the women who were not trusted became, the entrepreneurs of their communities. So we can do that too. And that is happening here. Myung, you bring up, just how the system, has been really stopping, the advancement of women, people of color. And, Power and the Equal Pay Campaign has really been looking at the income side. We've been talking to some degree about the expense side. And on the income side, we have to really be proud of New York because we've done a lot in terms of policy change. But women and people of color remain being underpaid, undervalued. And so we have to encourage the city to do more. We already banned salary history. We now have salary ranges in our job, descriptions. New York City agencies are looking at equity of their workers. That is not happening around the country, but it is happening in New York City, and it's happening more and more. And then in a few years, private sectors will have to look at their data and report it. So those are all great steps. But, there's so much more that can be done and needs to be done. Policy is about change. And we have to, see that also obviously in housing and the other areas. But we're hoping that over the next few years that we'll embrace more of these issues. And certainly we want to have a minimum wage that people can live on, right? We want our service workers to be paid fairly and on time. And we want to make sure that anyone who's looking for a job has all the information they need. And that's part of some of the work that we're doing right now. Would you like to know if you have flexible hours? Would you like to know if you're going to get a bonus? And would you like to know that you have childcare? So these are all issues that have to do with the expense, with our income side, to help us pay for that gap right now, this affordability gap that so many of us are, dealing with every day, and we have to solve. So coming back to, the issue of childcare, or rather, may I correct myself, caregiving, and we have to look at caregiving across the lifespan, right? Rachel, if you could talk a little bit about how childcare could be woven in to the housing, affordable housing market. Are there ways for us to look at this differently, so that we can help our renters?
So certainly, if you're going paycheck to paycheck every month, you are thinking about, am I paying childcare so I can go to work and pay the rent, or how is this all going to work out? So I think, first with the expansion of pre-K and then 3K, and now the Mamdani administration working with Governor Cuomo is expanding access to childcare even further. I think this is going to be a huge, I'm sorry, what did I say? I said Cuomo. Oh my God.
To wake me up.
I'm so embarrassed. I actually got a text from the governor's office while I was on here too. Governor Hochul's office. That's crazy because those two would not agree on childcare and there would be no expansion. But I think when you're living paycheck to paycheck, as many New Yorkers are, any of these subsidies could really be substituted, right? So we focus really on rent support. And I think when we think about the needs there, they're so limited. So the closest thing we have to a housing safety net in the United States is the Section 8 program, which is funded by the federal government. Only 1 in 3 households that are eligible receive assistance because we're just not willing to fund it at a federal level. The city has really stepped up and has created a local rental assistance program, City FEPS. We're now funding 60,000 households, helping them pay rent every month. We're pushing the legislature and Governor Hochul to expand a new program that was funded last year, the Housing Access Voucher Program. And the problem is, how I see it, is we're just like always fighting for scraps to fund these programs. Like none of this is a true safety net. So even if you can be the 1 in 3 people on Section 8, you're scared to increase your income because if you lose your voucher and you no longer need it, and then you lose your job, you can't access it again. So it's a really difficult system to be part of when you don't have that safety net. So I think it's so important when we're thinking about pairing, especially employment supports, wealth building, skill building, to think about, we have 60,000 households on City FEPS right now, but what's their path to afford their rent without it? We're not always connecting the dots between these things. And if that funding should go away, the rent they're paying is like 4 or 5 times what they can afford. So we do think a lot about, how do we build a more equitable system? We had a proposal for universal rental assistance, And one of the things we were looking for from the federal government was funding it on the mandatory side of the budget. And I think that's like the rethinking we need, right? Not to fight about what this, incremental increase will be every year, but really thinking of how do we build a housing safety net in this country.
Right. Thank you. Dr. Scott McKenzie, you're looking at these issues, through the aging community. And caregiving is one of the main issues that you're dealing with in terms of affordability. Is there a way for us, to connect the dots here between the housing issue, affordability and access to caregiving?
Absolutely. And as we rethink affordability, we really need to recognize the crucial role that caregivers play in boosting economic stability here in New York City. We're at a point where most of our caregivers don't even recognize that they're caregivers. They're providing care not only for spouses or their partner, neighbors, but also for their grandchildren. And by doing that, they're allowing younger people to go out and work and remain in the workforce. But here's the surprising fact. Most of these older adult caregivers are also working. Many of them are working full-time as well, and they're balancing all of these other responsibilities. So as we look at this, New York City Aging has a caregiving campaign that's running right now on most media platforms. And what we do is we provide support for these caregivers. So if they reach out to us on our Aging Connect system, we can provide things like assistance with long-term care planning, counseling, training, and in some limited instances, we can point them towards programs that can help provide economic stability for them as well. So we have to recognize that by these caregivers being in the system, they actually support all of the other work that takes place in the city. So we need to reform the way that they are looked at and give them paid leave. We need to think about caregiver supports that allow them to have flexibility in the workplace, whatever we can do to keep them in the workplace for as long as possible so that they can provide these supports is crucial.
Thank you so much for that. I think that deserves a thought. It's one of the big issues that we have to deal with. I think one of the goals of this administration is to create real equity. But that's certainly not what New York City is known for. It's just so much of the haves and have-nots, right? So you're in a unique position in terms of planning. How do we really make a change in that in that balance, I guess, that we are all trying to accomplish?
Sure. Thank you for that question. As we approach our planning work in this administration, we have a real focus and commitment to fair housing. And fair housing, from my perspective, is not only addressing, discrimination, but it's proactively working to make sure that we're creating housing opportunity for everybody. And so, across the city, there are a number of tools, as I discussed earlier, that we're using to help create new housing and help create new affordable housing. But we're paying special attention to creating opportunities for housing and what we, would consider high cost, sort of high opportunity communities, so that we also start to see more integration across our city and more people able to access affordable housing in communities that have been closed off in the past. Last year and during the last election, in the recently passed ballot measures, there is a measure that now requires our agency to move forward with what's called an affordable housing fast track. This means that communities that have contributed little to no affordable housing in the last 5 years will now have a fast track approval process for new affordable housing. And so recently at the City Planning Commission, we approved the methodology to determine which communities those are. In the fall, we will identify those communities and begin that work. These, may be low density communities, high density communities, but communities that traditionally have not created affordable housing. And sometimes due to political challenges, right? This is an opportunity for us to be able to move affordable housing more quickly in concert with those communities. I think additionally, while it's important to make sure that people are accessing opportunities throughout the city, it's also critically important to make sure that we're investing in all communities. And so in this administration, we will still be focused on pursuing neighborhood plans to make sure that we're not only supporting housing development, but addressing the public realm and green space and access to transportation and jobs in communities that have been traditionally underinvested. And so that certainly is a focus. We know, I think, I don't know if Sharon stepped out, but she shared in her remarks around, how members of her own family or people that she knows have left New York City in order to live comfortably and find opportunity. And we see that particularly with Black New Yorkers. What we also see is that while we know a number of Black New Yorkers have left our city, in the community districts that have actually had substantial housing growth over the past 10 years or so, those are some of the only communities where we actually see the Black population growing, right? And so it really makes the connection that the availability of housing and the availability of affordable housing is really critical to make sure that we keep the diversity that we have.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. Yes, okay. These are all so much important information and ideas. Unfortunately, we have not a lot of time for each of our speakers, and they could give us so much information. So, Mian, you work a lot with the private sector with funding. So when we talk about the housing, crisis that we're having, we have to have business as part of that and as part of the solution, right? So we don't have very long for you to tell us about it, but could you tell us about a place-based investment and how that has played out and in building in cities?
Sure. So there's a lot of different ways that the private sector, the foundations, et cetera, have gotten involved. And I think the most important thing that we've been trying to instill with the cities that we work with is to say that the city has an important role to play in bringing everybody together. And that includes the community that is being impacted by whatever investments that are being made. And it's hard because sometimes you're not going to want to hear what the community has to say, but it's very important. So for example, we worked with one city where the city was thinking about which communities to invest in and which commercial corridors. And we knew that there was a commercial corridor that we had been looking at and working with where there was this one particular businessman, and he had this, it was a chicken and ribs place that he owned that his grandfather started. And it was in this particular commercial corridor that he was afraid was going to go out of business, that he was going to be the failure of the family business because the district where he was in was really crime-ridden. People thought it was unsafe. Mostly it was because it was people of color living there. So he was trying to figure out how to keep this business going. And so when he would talk to anybody in the city, they would say, well, we don't have enough police force, and they would just keep going to the public safety side. That's important, but it wasn't the real problem. So we came in and part of what we do is to sit there and say, let's really get to the root of the matter. Like, what is really happening here? And so what we decided that we helped them to see for themselves is that there was actually activity going on at the city because the city folks, and I've worked in the city folks are well-intended. We only do this because we want to help, right? So the city folks had all of these plans that they were going to do. They just never really listened to this man about what the real issues were. And so once they heard that, they said, oh, you know what? Instead of sending more police in there, we were thinking about building affordable housing. Why don't we think about building it in your district so that we can go ahead and build it there? And then by putting more people and more neighbors into that area, we can actually help the neighborhood be more safe. We can actually grow more businesses that way. So it's that kind of activity where you just sometimes have to convene folks. And Tara, before, when she was speaking, said something about how she didn't know how to get more financial aid. So much of that knowledge capital is so critical because money is important. And this is what we tell our funders all the time. Money is important, but you can't just throw money at the problem because there's a lot of programs that have money being thrown at it that's not working because you don't have the social capital and the knowledge capital to actually make the connecting the dots work. And that is really important for everybody to be thinking about, whether you're a funder in the private sector or you're in the public sector. Knowing how to connect those dots, knowing and understanding what it really takes to bring everybody together and the cross-sector partnership that's necessary for things to work. So that's one of the things that I would say.
Thank you so much for that, Mia. We don't have a lot of time, but I think, could we take one or two questions? Would that be okay?
Yes, we'd love to. Oh, see one right. We've got the A student up front. So we have time for about 2 questions. You raise your hand and we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, thank you for this presentation. I'm a biochemist and also STEM adjunct teacher. I was just curious about, this is for Ms. Sherman. What happened to the research methods or application of green housing, building homes and shipping containers like the green design movement, which could save some money in housing? I'm just curious about exploring the different types of housing that's already built and that could save money. When I say smart manufacturing housing made with quickly additive manufacturing method, built housing that's green cement, but it can be built in like a week. Thank you.
Thank you. I know that there have been some attempts, and I think that there are still some efforts underway to explore opportunities for more modular housing in New York, particularly, I mean, certainly not in every community, but where it would make sense. Obviously, New York has a very complex building code, which is also focused on, making sure the city is climate resilient. I can't speak to it in detail, I'll be honest with you. But I know that there has been exploration of different types of materials and things that can help speed up work. In our world, on the planning side, we've been focused on process reform and how that can actually speed up the development of housing. But my colleagues at the Department of Building certainly probably could provide more detail. But obviously there's a commitment to also making sure that our buildings in the city are efficient, climate resilient, and ultimately safe. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, my question has to do with, it's directed to Ms. Maying J. Lee. And she mentioned 5 women micro business owners in the loan process. Can you tell me the name of the, yeah.
It's Grameen America. It's GRAMEEN America. And the website is, I believe, grameenamerica.org or .com, because I think they're for profit.
Hi, good morning. Thank you so much for your amazing presentations and comments. I'm concerned about how are we going to support affordability for the individuals who move America and move New York City. I'm talking about our city workers, our healthcare workers, our teachers, our firefighters, our police department, because there's not enough conversation on how these families can also stay in place when they're just above the poverty threshold.
Would anyone like to answer that?
Oh, can I add the nonprofit workers who also take on all the contracts for the city and provide housing to?
Yeah, I'll just quick. Yes, and everybody. So I'll just quickly jump in. At the start of the conversation, I mentioned the true cost of living measure. And the reason why I mentioned that is because we know that the poverty measure is inadequate in understanding need. New York City also has its own poverty measure, which goes a little further, but the true cost of living measure is a different measure. It's focused on what it actually costs to live in the city. And what it tells us, right, citywide, and this varies, is that it's almost $160,000 for a family to live comfortably in our city. And so there are a range of people, from those who are very low income to moderate income to teachers to firefighters to a number of folks who need ways in which the city can help drive down their costs. And it looks different for everybody. And so when I shared the example of the mandatory inclusionary housing, I discussed the fact that for the most part, we're seeing AMIs between 40 and 60, but certainly we're seeing moderate income housing as well. There are other tools, right, like public housing, where I worked for the City Housing Authority for many, many years, which, have housing that's for extremely low income New Yorkers, for instance. And so all of these tools need to be working together at play with each other. I would also speak to the point that Bev made as well, too, which is the focus on income as well. And so the city itself has taken on a pay equity study to also understand how its workers can achieve pay equity. But this is also something that will happen in the private sector by law now, and would also focus on how we can help bring up income, the other side of the equation for New Yorkers.
And I'll just add,
yes.
Sorry, I'll just add that our city administration, obviously, you've heard our mayor speak and you've heard him speak about making New York City affordable for everyone. That includes city workers. And I'll just mention to you, I know you've all heard by now about the municipal grocery stores that will be open, and it will help folks, whether they're working for the city, they're receiving SNAP benefits or whatever is their income, to be able to stretch their budgets by having these grocery stores available where they can go and get these food staples like the bread, the rice, and those things that you need just to hold you over until that next income spike comes in. And I'll also mention, if you remember the rollout of the child care program, that there were seats available for city workers right at the table with everyone else.
Thank you so much for reminding us of that. So I get the last question, and that is, I'd like to do a speed round. That means really quick, okay? But we have all these people here, in the audience, and I know you represent nonprofits and just students and many, areas of interest. What is one thing that you could recommend that people do that would really make a difference in the next 6 to 12 months if they were to take an action? Because Sharon gave us a job to do, and that's to walk out with one thing to do. So what do you suggest? So let's go. Rachel?
So we have the mayor's affordable housing plan coming out soon. Read it, see if you like it, give feedback. The governor's housing plan will come out, a 5-year statewide housing plan in 2027. So also that's an opportunity to think about what the needs are. But an immediate ask for today, I talked about earlier how we have such fragility in our housing safety net. There are 5,500 emergency housing vouchers that were withdrawn by the Trump administration. And it's New Yorkers who are going to lose their subsidy. And we're advocating for this to be part of the state budget. So if you go to New Destiny, it's a nonprofit that focuses on domestic violence survivors. They have a sign-on letter today that you can sign on, pressuring the governor and the state legislature to pick up these vouchers in the state budget so that we prevent homelessness for 12,000 New Yorkers.
Excellent. We'll just go right down quickly.
Sure. I think there are many things, but I would say, and you are all doing this already, I think it's critical at this juncture that just remaining civically engaged and also sharing information with your neighbor, your family member, et cetera. There are a lot of resources that are available through the city that aren't always maximized. And so we also want to make sure that people are taking advantage of that. But remaining engaged in your neighborhood, understanding the change that's happening in your community, coming to the table, sharing your feedback, testifying at hearings, it really does matter. And so that would be my point of advice.
And mine for older adults, obviously, is that they are so afraid at this point of losing benefits like SNAP and other benefits, and automatic enrollment would really help for some of our older adults. And there is a bill now in the City Council, Intro 248, from the Committee on General Welfare. The chair is Crystal Hudson, and it will create an automatic enrollment program for city-created benefits like FAIRS, New York City, SNAP, SCREE, and other programs. So this is something that we can get accomplished if we work together.
I would just say, be like Tara. She was such an inspiration, and she saw the one thing that she could do, and she did it. So I would recommend all of you to think about the one issue and all of the affordability, big, huge tent of affordability. What is the one thing that you can have some impact on, and then go do it. Help somebody, figure it out, share that information. And then also what all of these folks said on the panel, you can think of it as pressuring your elected officials, or you're actually supporting them, because the more noise you make, the more they can feel empowered to go and say, this is what the people want. So go do it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. On the economic equity front, I have to share that we will be pushing a bill in New York City and in New York State that will give all that information, benefits information, added to our salary range law. And I think, Christian, can we follow up with some of the links on these ideas, great. So I want everyone to thank our panel. They covered so much ground in such a short time. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Beverly, and to our panelists for such a thoughtful and informative conversation. We heard today that affordability is about much more than just cost. It's about access, it's about stability, it's about mobility, and whether our systems are truly designed to support people across every stage of life. We heard that the economy is only as strong as everyone's ability to participate in it. And as Sadaya said, time is money, which should underscore the sense of urgency that we each need to have in addressing these issues and ensuring that we're all connecting the dots. Next, we're going to hear from public leaders working at the intersection of policy and impact, leaders thinking about how government can respond to the realities New Yorkers are facing right now. So please welcome Council members Julie Wan and Virginia Maloney and Dr. Elizabeth Ananat as they have a conversation connecting policy to impact.
So a bit of a bait and switch. Just me. Council member Wan is on her way, but I'll kick things off.
I'm so excited to be here today, speaking to one of the rising stars of New York City leadership. And you, along with Councilmember Wan, who we're looking forward to talking to soon, you have so much, both of you, expertise in economic development and technological investment, and in truly supporting a New York workforce that's being buffeted by huge changes in job opportunities and in the cost of living. And our conversation is going to focus on this implementation, this connecting the dots, how elected officials are ensuring that these investments in housing, workforce, and caregiving actually reach the communities that are most impacted, right? And what accountability really looks like in practice. And I'd like to start by just asking you, Councilmember Maloney, where are the policies that are designed to help families build mobility unintentionally creating barriers? For example, through benefit cliffs or eligibility rules? What needs to be redesigned and what are the opportunities for doing that?
First off, thank you so much for having me. Really excited to be here and be part of this conversation. As an EDC alum, I love seeing a Women.NYC program. And want to thank WCC as well. One of the issues that you alluded to is the rapid cutoff in benefits, which may in some cases incentivize the wrong behavior. So if you're working hard, you take on an extra shift and you inadvertently become ineligible for a program, that can have the opposite impact of what the policies are designed to provide. So I definitely think we need to be looking at more gradual programs that aren't so in or out, where you can still qualify for rental assistance, for example, even as you're making that incremental progress towards income mobility and the next phase.
Great, thanks.
Can you hear me now? Oh, okay. I was just saying that there are instances where programs are incentivizing certain behaviors or should be designed to incentivize certain behaviors, but with dramatic cutoffs, for example, on rental assistance, you're inadvertently creating situations where someone who decides to take that extra shift or pick up an extra job and then disqualify themselves from the rental assistance that they're so dependent on. From a policy perspective, looking at those cutoffs and also thinking about gradual policies that could help uplift a family as they're moving up the income mobility scale.
Thanks so much. In terms of these programs that are helping families with mobility, of course, one of the most exciting policy efforts right now in the city is this one to create a universal childcare system.
Yes,
and
we're very excited about that.
Universal programs are, of course, a great way to avoid cliffs. because if you can't sort of become disqualified for a program, then you never run into this trouble, right? But we know that formal childcare can provide great early childhood education opportunities, right? But we also know that the hours for formal care can conflict with what many workers, especially low-wage workers in our 24/7 economy need. And from a policy perspective, how can we better support workers outside that traditional 9 to 5 schedule, particularly single parents who require non-traditional care? And what policy solutions would you recommend to address the need for both early education and work supportive care for these families?
First, I want to commend this council administration and the mayoral administration, as well as the governor, for really rallying behind the need for universal childcare. As you said, universal, that is actually available and accessible to anyone who needs it, and starts earlier with pre-K and 3K programs. The call to action has been very clear since January, and I'm really grateful to see things moving in that front. The first step is access. The second step is increasing flexibility. As you mentioned, we have a 24-hour city here. It's the city that never sleeps. Our hospital workers are working around the clock, taking multiple shifts. Transit runs all night, and you can get a burrito at 1 a.m. in New York. So we can't be relying on childcare systems that assume the traditional 9 to 5 or assume two parents are there to help aid with a childcare infrastructure. So what you see is sort of these informal neighborhoods rising to the occasion, whether it's your neighbor helping out or a relative. And there's, from a policy perspective, ways that we could help bring that into the light and assist with reimbursements, and while not bogging down that in those informal networks in bureaucracy. The issue of access to childcare is an economic one. We really need women participating in the workforce fully and having to face that decision of, do I take that shift, or do I come home and help support my child after the 5 o'clock time slot is something that we definitely need to work on further. One of the things I'm also very passionate about is ensuring that there's both maternity and paternity leave, and that both are enforced in cultural norms. That is a real moment where if it becomes normal for both men and women to take that step back to support their family and support childcare early on, it will equalize the playing field. So for all employers out there, ensuring that maternity and paternity leave are taken is something I view as a real economic lever as well for women.
Thanks. Yeah, and I think we've seen, right, that even that leave that happens right at the beginning, it's so important for setting these patterns and roles, and we've seen it play out, over the long term, so that it's still mattering at pre-K pickup, right? Whether you had that leave at the beginning, and such an important issue.
Absolutely.
Thank you for highlighting it.
The formative development
of the family. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we've been talking a lot about supports, for families who are having trouble making ends meet. Conversation often focuses on affordability as cost reduction, right? So making childcare, as we're discussing, more affordable, lowering the cost that people bear for housing, for healthcare,
right.
Gasoline, certainly today, right? But sometimes income growth as a strategy for increasing affordability can get lost in this conversation. What policies do you see as really important right now to invest in terms of actually helping families build long-term mobility?
I'm a big believer in income mobility and job creation, and especially high-paying jobs. A safe apartment, childcare options, all of these things open up when you have a high-paying job. The first step is in education. So we need to be making sure that educational opportunities are available through all phases of life. So Gutman College is one in my district, in the house, where you're helping students get on a path that works for them, to whether it's a 4-year degree or an apprenticeship program. Paid internships is another key experience that helps people learn early on and put themselves in the workforce. So investing in those types of programs is really critical to helping someone get on the right path. And that doesn't necessarily have to be early on. There are plenty of workforce development or reskilling programs that are shifting people's career trajectories, even midlife. One such example is Pursuit, which is helping to deal with the shifts that are happening in technology, and giving workers tech skills to help pivot their careers. I think that we're going to continue to see technology becoming an even more important part of the economy, particularly with the rise of artificial intelligence. So ensuring that we're integrating our workforce development programs with those types of programming and skills is going to be increasingly important. And making sure that those programs are mapped to the actual workforce, so that we're not training in a vacuum, but training based on what employers' needs are. Women.NYC is an example of doing just that, identifying growth sectors in the economy and promoting programs and connecting women to resources that will help them grow their companies in those spaces. So thinking not just about the training aspect, but where the workforce as a whole is heading.
Thanks.
One of the stories I'll point to is New York was in a moment like this in 2010 or so, when the tech economy was really growing in Silicon Valley, and we needed to have those jobs here in New York and create a Silicon Alley. So we invested in Cornell Technion, which I think has been a big success story for New York, bringing talent here to the city and creating resources for to grow those companies and have more employment opportunities here. But I think that workforce development piece is really critical.
Thanks. When we think about the workforce development and investing in that workforce, one of our earlier speakers talked about the difficulty of following up with accountability once sort of the money gets dispersed. What do you think is most important in terms of accountability once that money is getting dispersed, to make sure that workforce development is really helping the folks who are the least likely otherwise to get connected to these jobs?
So in funding programs or supporting programs, I think we always need to be looking at the key performance indicators to see if the goal of the program is being achieved. So in a workforce development program, you're hoping that you can shift someone's income trajectory higher. So what's the income prior to joining the program to after, job placement metrics. So looking for those types of outcome-oriented metrics to measure whether or not a program is effectively achieving its goals. So if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. So I think that measurement is really key.
Thanks. One thing I want to make sure that we do, just given all of the leaders that we have in the audience here, as well as today up on the stage, when I look around at these leaders and I pay attention to Sharon's call that everyone walk away with something to do today, what is one policy, investment, or partnership that you would urge folks in this room to actively support this year? And possibly, what is one that, in terms of accountability, that maybe isn't delivering the results that we would have hoped and should be rethought and maybe redirected?
I come from the tech sector, so I was a female, woman product leader in a large tech company up until January, when I switched over to city government. And you can see how the corporate world is really leaning into and adopting artificial intelligence and technical tools to help deliver more. That if you look at Anthropic or other AI groups are projecting what the impact will be on the workforce, and it disproportionately is expected to impact parts of the economy that are supported by women. At the same time, you see that adoption of early tech in general, there's a slower adoption curve for women. Whether that's, historically that's always been true, and it's certainly true with artificial intelligence. And I think that my call to action would be to just start trying some of these tools, whether it's ChatGPT, and getting more comfortable with what will soon become more commonplace, and encouraging our programs and workforce development programs to start thinking that way as well, so that women are not left behind as this dramatic shift in the economy happens over the next couple of years.
Thanks. Since we're still waiting for Councilmember One, maybe we could just go ahead and open questions to Councilmember Maloney, and then switch back.
Sounds great.
For everyone who's cold right now, the air has been turned down or up. However, it should get warmer is the key takeaway. All right.
So I just want to say thank you so much. I think I have a lot of questions, but I certainly won't ask them all in the public, in the open space like this. But one of the things I also had that struck me was a comment. I mean, especially because we're here today, we're thinking about or rethinking what all this sort of means. And it's just interesting because, I was weaving the narrative of the caregiver and what exactly that looks like and who the people that often we're leaning into to be able to do that. Thinking about, what are the factors that make things affordable here in the city for people, and childcare often gets raised. And yes, kudos to the current administration and the prior administrations that created the universal system that ended up allowing there to be early childhood access for people, because that was a factor. But, another thing that I'm definitely struck by is after school. Childcare responsibilities doesn't just end when somebody is 4 years old. You have people that are in kindergarten up through, dare I say, maybe 6th grade, 8th grade. After school slots, they are rare. They are very much determinant upon which community you reside in, who gets them, whether or not they're subsidized or whether or not there is a cost. You think about the programming as well. There are some parts of the city where, like the after-school programming, it is true enrichment, and it really nourishes the full perspectives of children and what it is that they can contribute to. But I would dare say that I think that's also something that if each of us are sort of thinking about an area that has impact on our communities and potentially also in our communities and in our individual households, after school is another big thing that I feel as though has a real impact on whether or not people can, in fact, provide for their families in the right way in terms of the jobs that they're taking, whether or not they have to go home. I was a latchkey kid. I know that that's still a thing. But to be honest, for a lot of individuals, it's not. And so that's also a factor that I would encourage people to sort of think about and see whether or not there's opportunities to advocate for better funding and better programming in after school that's consistent and equitable across the city, because there's a lot of kids and families in need.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like full support of your statement. I think it's after school care, evening care, weekend care. Like we were saying in one of the first questions, the workforce model is not set from 9 a.m. drop off to 3 p.m. pickup. That's unrealistic. And even 9 to 5 is unrealistic for most workers. So completely agree with you. I think that the informal economy is picking up the slack there, and we need more formal structures. Absolutely agree. And to your point, those after-school programs, the best after-school programs are enrichment opportunities where students are learning, they're getting opportunities to prepare for academic experiences that are going to help them later in life. Like all of that is completely right. And we need to expand those opportunities, and we need to make them more equitably available. I completely agree with you.
You want to?
Thank goodness.
Councilmember Juan is here, so
I'm about to give up the hot seat.
Yeah, so switch out the hot seat. Thank you so much, Councilmember Maloney. Greatly appreciate your insights and your work. And I think a great story to tell. Up until December was working in the private sector. Now we have a newly elected official who's changing New York City. So inspiration. Thank you.
And thank you so much, Councilmember Maloney, for that was a heavy lift to be up here by yourself. And so grateful to have you here today, Councilmember Wong. Welcome. Just to catch you up a little bit, we've been talking a lot about connecting the dots and making sure that the policies that we envision to improve affordability in the city actually work on the ground. And we know that making sure policies work on the ground is more challenging when those who are affected have diverse needs for which a one-size-fits-all approach won't fit, just as we were talking about with childcare. District 26, the district you represent in Queens, is one of the most diverse in New York City. Where are you seeing the biggest disconnect between policy intent around housing, workforce, caregiving, and what especially immigrant, low income, and working class families are actually experiencing?
Good afternoon, everybody. It's so good to see you all. I'm sorry for the delay. My mom brain, I went on the one to City Hall, and then I was like, wait a second. I was supposed to go uptown, and it never come uptown. So thank you to Councilmember Maloney for holding it down while I got here. Thank you for your patience. I would say that one of the biggest mistakes that I've seen, or the biggest mishaps, first and foremost, just like Councilmember Maloney, I come from 10 years of tech experience. I worked at IBM prior to pivoting to government. And I only did that for the sole purpose of making sure that every single public housing neighbor got internet and cable TV. And within 6 months of being elected, we did that. And now citywide, within the last 3 years, every public housing resident has free internet and cable TV. And our next goal, thank you. Because when you really think about it, it's about accessibility and giving people equal opportunity. So right now, we're currently in the AI revolution. Just like the Industrial Revolution, when a lot of our jobs went offshore, right now we're seeing automation of our jobs and there are some replacements for administrative roles, but it's still in development. But as this happens, how is our government preparing our workforce to make sure that everybody is being upskilled, reskilled, and what public funds are being created to make sure that these large firms, the AI companies who are causing these changes, the transformation, that they are paying their fair share to ensure that everybody is getting ready for the AI revolution. Yes, because what we saw after World War II, during the Great Recession, when all the industrial jobs left and went offshore, then when there's a lot of job stagnation on young men, especially who don't have anything to do, then it tends to lead to war. And we don't want World War III. We want to make sure that everybody has equal opportunity. And what I see first and foremost is that, one, we have to make sure that we're thinking about what does this new future look like as a government? Does that mean we have 4-day work weeks? Does that mean that we have universal basic income? What does this really mean? And when we have tax or some sort of incentive for the companies to, one, make sure that if you're going to have a resource action of 300,000 people, 175,000 people, we're seeing these mass layoffs every single week in the news. So what have they actually done as a company to say, okay, I tried for 6 months to upskill or reskill these people, and I've given them the capabilities and they failed to meet those benchmarks, and therefore I had to lay them off instead of just dumping people to leave them high and dry. Second, what I also see as a big mistake is the way that we calculate poverty. So for example, we're currently using outdated data, 2020 census. That doesn't even account for the 250,000 people who came to the city as migrants. So what are you actually benchmarking or using as an indicator? Secondly, what I also see as a big mistake is the way that we do things as if with a big broad stroke or a brush, saying that this is how we're going to do it, like 9.5 property taxes all across the board. We really need to have precision and targeting and think about what we're actually going to do. So if we're talking about poverty levels, because oftentimes the city council will start to calculate, for example, my district, Long Island City, you may think it's a wealthy district because you see the high rises of Hunters Point. But did you know that it also has the highest amount of poverty in the same zip code? Because I have Queensbridge houses, the largest public housing in the country, as well as Ravenswood houses. And I also have the highest amount of migrant shelter concentrations, as well as the only veteran shelter. We have over 15,000 people who are homeless in the same very zip code. But because you're calculating it by community board district or by council district or by zip code, you've now dismissed all of these people who currently are living either doubled up, unhoused, or in public housing. So now you're cutting my funding for my district because of your miscalculations.
Thank you. One of the things that we're trying to that Sharon sort of tasked us all with doing is making sure that everyone leaves here today with one action to take. And so I want to ask you the same question, in fact, that I asked Councilmember Maloney, which is when you look around at all the leaders in this room who all have power to do things to improve our city as they walk out of the door today, what is one policy, investment, or partnership that you would urge them to actively support this year?
Universal childcare. I have 2 kids. I run around all the time trying to get them. And also, we don't have aftercare. Universal childcare, we're no longer working in agriculture. We don't go home when the sun sets. It should not be a 9 to 3. We have to work until 6. And some of us, especially those who are in public service, we're working until 9 or 10 o'clock at night. We need to have universal childcare. And we used to, the 1970s in this country, where the government thought that women should work. Do we no longer believe that? I believe that we do. So all of us who are here in this room, if we're also especially women of color, especially Black women, I give my hats and my flowers to you, because for all of your fights for civil rights and for women's rights, I am so grateful for all of you. Because I could not be sitting here without you all and all the work that are the legacy that you all carry on your shoulders that I get to benefit from as another woman of color and as an immigrant. But first and foremost, if we want women to work, that includes immigrant women. These migrant women want to work, allow them to work and have federal access to work authorizations. And all the women who are here, you not only do the caregiving for your children and your great-grandchildren, but you've also been the caregiver for your husband when he's sick or your partner when they're sick. You're also the caregiver for your parents as they age. We truly have been forced to be the backbone of the economy because men cannot go to work if the women are not caring for their parents, their children. When they're sick, we have to take care of them, but it's often unpaid. So I really hope that with the governor, we are at the precipice of getting universal childcare back, but we are far from doing it the correct way. We have to pay teachers fairly. Right now, parents are incredibly underpaid, and we have to make sure that there's aftercare. Women cannot just leave work at 3 p.m. And we also have to care our home care workers fairly as well. The state of New York pays them below minimum wage for 24/7 home care. So there's just so much to talk about when we talk about childcare or care overall. So universal childcare has become a buzzword, but I think we have to make sure that there's clear understanding that universal childcare means aftercare. And also universal childcare also means for adults as well, for home care and really caring for everybody from the moment they're born until the day that you die. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Both of our panelists today, thank you so much.
That was wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much. We heard again about the importance of connecting the dots. We heard about the importance of precision and not just depending on outdated data or broad strokes. So this is really, really powerful information. I hope we're taking notes. And our action item, universal childcare. Let's get behind that and get that through. Our final panel, it looks at the future economy and the systems, investments, and partnerships that are needed to create pathways to opportunity and long-term economic stability. And I will now have the pleasure of serving as your moderator for this final conversation on powering the future economy. Please join me in welcoming our panelists. I'm going to take off my MC hat and put on my moderator. All right, so let's make sure this is on. There we go. Here we go. Heather C. Mulligan, President and CEO of the Business Council of New York State, Inc. Heather, do we have you? Yep. There we go. Wendy M. Starr, Esquire, Senior Vice President, Equity and Community Impact at New York City Economic Development Corporation. Councilwoman Chanel Thomas Henry of the District 21, the City of New York. And Rafia Zahir-Udin, Vice President and Program Officer, Corporate Responsibility at JPMorganChase. Thank you all for joining us here today. And I'll just add that we were also meant to be joined by Marjorie D. Parker, who's the president and CEO of Jobs First NYC. But unfortunately, we were just advised that she came down with food poisoning. So she won't be joining us, but let's send positive healing energy her way, okay? All right, we're going to jump right into it. Now, Wendy, I'd actually like to start with you. Now, in your role with the New York City Economic Development Corporation, I know you lead initiatives that are designed to connect New Yorkers to quality jobs and sustainable career pathways, which is so important because there's often a disconnect between economic development and local workforce access. So tell us, what's not working and what structural change would fix it? Big question.
Thank you so much. Really happy to be here. Yeah, it is a big question. I have around 5 pages of notes to answer it, but I'll try to stick to just a few points that really came to mind when we were thinking about this. One is that the training, and we've heard a lot about workforce development today, really needs to be tied to real employer demand, but also community need. I think that there is, especially in economic development, a tendency to develop and then think about what can we do for the community. And I'm really proud of our economic mobility team, some of who are in the room today, that we're really taking a community first look. So I think we need to think about community engagement and design models in partnership with both employers and community when we're looking at that. We have economic mobility networks that we've launched that are really doing needs assessments in the neighborhoods and taking a purposeful and intentional look at what can we do to scale up both training and also job placement. And second, sorry, I'll try to do this quick. Second is diverse entrepreneurship, right? We want to do workforce development training. We want to place people in the jobs that fit with their skill set, but we can't leave it there. We have to move to phase 2, which is how can we help diverse entrepreneurs scale their businesses? Women.NYC, which I know you've heard a lot about and is now part of our team, so we're very excited, does that work excellently, really looking at emerging industries. And then I just want to do a third plug now that we're all talking about economic justice and thinking about different lens. One thing that I'm really excited about that EDC is taking a look at is worker-owned models. How can we move into more worker-owned cooperatives? How can we do more conversion of businesses where owners are retiring and they might be open to converting their businesses to a worker-owned model? And so that's something I think we should all really pay attention to and see how we can support investing in those models in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Thomas Henry, so you represent Corona, East Elmhurst, Jackson Heights, to advance policy supporting working families, right, and small businesses and immigrant communities with that focus on economic opportunity, equity, neighborhood investment. Programs exist, right, but access still remains uneven. So what's the biggest gap between policy and participation, and how should government address it?
Well, thank you. So yes, I do represent the 21st Council District, which I must say Queens is the most diverse place in the world.
Queens represent.
And I often say my district is probably one of the most diverse within itself, being the 21st Council District. So within that, I think from a government standpoint, we need to take a step back and actually promote the services that we have and not take advantage and think that everyone knows what the city offers, right? So when you think about starting a business, everyone doesn't create a business plan. One doesn't know what a business plan is. And we look at this cookie cutter model of this is how you start your business, when in fact, and especially in communities like mine that is so diverse, where you have a lot of immigrants who are coming in and starting business because they don't have access to traditional jobs, because they can't work, because they can't, because of our federal policies, they're starting these businesses on a whim. They may have a food cart and that's their business. So there's no business plan in that. And oftentimes they don't speak the native language. So from a policy perspective, and we do this now, where whenever we're passing things, we make sure that they're communicated in a variety of languages. But how are we promoting those services? I had a hearing yesterday with small business services, and it's like, if I'm a new entrepreneur coming, I don't know 311 exists. I may not have access to the internet, as my colleague just mentioned. When she came into office, she had to make sure that more people who had access to the internet to go to a website and look at these services. So I think we have to do, and I come from a marketing background. So before government, I've only been a council member for 4 months. I often say 20 minutes. And when we think about how the private sector does it, like when the new iPhone is coming out, everyone knows it's coming, right? You know all the features, you know all the bells and whistles, you know where to go get it. But when a business is starting or when we implement a new policy, only those 51 of us know because we voted on it. The agency knows because they have to implement it, but the individuals who actually need to get the benefits have no idea. So I say from a policy perspective, every time we institute or roll out a new policy, we need to roll it out like a marketing campaign, so to say. We need to make sure that those who need the services know the services exist, know how to get to them, and make it easy for them to get to. They shouldn't have to go to multiple locations, multiple agencies. It should be a one-stop shop and to make it truly accessible to everyone.
Yeah, thank you. So, Rafia, I know in your work with corporate responsibility at JPMorganChase, you're also supporting pathways to employment and entrepreneurship as well, financial stability for underserved communities. And I know you also partner with several local organizations supporting diverse communities in critical industries. So, what makes a local partnership effective? And how do you measure whether it's actually closing the gaps for underserved communities?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think there's been a lot already said on this panel that I want to draw from. I think I sit in a very interesting role where I'm at the intersection of how are we funding local organizations that are driving economic development for the city and workforce development for the city? How are we bridging the gap with our lines of business to understand what are the products and services that we have? What do we need to tailor for lower income communities? And where do you bring in our partnerships so that when we are supporting anything, we know that we can get someone connected into a job or we can get them banked as a small business. And I think those are like the crux of like where we sit is cross-stakeholder relationships. But I would say the three things that like really make a partnership effective is like it must be community-led, right? Like we have to listen to the community. Like we cannot design solutions that don't meet the needs of people and where they are at. And a lot of that work happens through a lot of community roundtables with organizations where they are. Like my colleagues Nasir and Deborah are here. They help facilitate a lot of that work and bring us in to really talk to local communities about what are your biggest challenges. And a lot of times it is because I can't get a well-paying job. I can't figure out how to get a loan for my small business or get it off the ground. The second piece is whatever we do has to be industry informed or employer led. Like if you are supporting an initiative, you have to make sure that like you know that you can get this person into a well-paying job, not living wage, because living wage here is not enough to live in New York City. It is not, right? And how do we make sure that we build in and share what are the resources we can offer you as a bank, right? And we know we don't always get it right, and we don't always talk to community the best, and we have to make sure that we are talking their language and we are able to really share with them like what we can support them with. And then the third is like, you have to be accountable and you have to actually say, what does success look like before you even go down that road of building a partnership or funding a program? Because if you cannot track for jobs that don't exist or for opportunities where you're not thinking about a small business and what they need in terms of coaching, technical assistance, or access to loans. That's why when we think about local partnerships, we really think about like how do we show up authentically and what can we offer. I'll share an example. We work a lot with non-traditional employment for women. That is an organization that is supporting women getting into jobs in the skilled trades. These are jobs that are pathways to mobility. They offer benefits. You get a retirement package, but it's very hard to be a woman in the trades because you have children, you're taking care of your parents. Skilled trades jobs are not 9 to 5. Sometimes you have to work late. And so we think about like, not just how do we support you in terms of thinking about your training model, how you're adapting to cleaner, greener energy solutions, but how are we working with public sector partners around childcare funds? So if you have to work late, you can pay for childcare. And then lastly, how do we use our footprint as a large private company employer to support some of that pipeline, right? We have a large building. We have a lot of real estate assets here, and we're looking at like, how do we work with these organizations into pathways into our company? So we're doing a major infrastructure project renovation in 383 Madison, which is our old headquarters. We want to make sure that we're hiring out of that program. So there's some sort of accountability set up. And that's like how we think about the model of effective partnerships in New York City. So not just about leading with a check, but really leading with a relationship and what we can offer you.
I love that. Leading with a relationship. Very good. I do want to I want to circle back to Councilmember Thomas Henry, because entrepreneurship really is a key pathway. But as you were alluding to before, many founders lack the resources and support to actually scale. So what, you talked about marketing before, which I love that and part of my industry, so I love it. Very, very important. But I want to ask, what actual policy changes do you think are needed to actually level the playing field?
So I'll say this, when you think about policy changes, one that comes to mind is, and then this is talking about our MWB program. So our Minority and Women Business Program, and New York City and New York State has a very robust program, which I'm gonna take this point to just kind of, I don't want to say sound the alarm, but sound the alarm to any minority or women businesses that we have in the room. Hey, I'm not sure if everyone's aware, but our Minority and Women Business Program is you have to be city certified to participate in city-funded contract programs. You have to be state certified on the state level. But then on larger scale projects, like take the Second Avenue subway, where there are federal funds tied to it, you have to have your DBE certification, which is your Diversity Business Enterprise certification. That is a federal program. As of October, individuals who were certified were decertified. And they were decertified because the powers that be in the White House felt that it was discriminatory to use your gender or race as a determinant of your disadvantage. I can go on and on and on. So I just sound the alarm on that because that's not something that everyone knows. I know because I was a business owner. I was a certified DBE, and before entering the council, I got a letter saying you're no longer certified, right? So I say that to say those were policies that were put into place to level the playing field. And as we see today, those are policies that are being taken away that put us just steps further behind. But when we talk about, so that's an example of a policy, but even taking it a step further from a government perspective, we need to make sure that when companies are bidding for work, especially city contracts, that we're putting into parameters to make sure that they're utilizing MWBs as they should be, because even within that program, you could ask for a waiver and say, I couldn't find a business to do that. So we need to, from a policy perspective, we need to close those loopholes that make it easier for a prime or someone else to say, oh, we tried, but we failed. No, the program and the percentage was not done in a vacuum. There are disparity studies done to prove that there are enough women and there are enough minorities to do this type of work. So we shouldn't have waivers to allow people to say and be lazy and not go after that work. And prior to becoming a member, I did the LaGuardia redevelopment program and some other construction programs. And oftentimes you found that people either use the same companies over and over again, which I don't fault them because, if you work with someone, you like their work, you go back. But there are so many others that need that opportunity and need to be lifted up, and their businesses need to grow as well. So we need to get creative and make sure that we're touching a multitude of businesses across our city. And to the point where you made earlier, where our workforce building upon and helping those individuals become entrepreneurs. Because on the various jobs that I've done, we have engineers that are working for bigger companies and are actually the companies making a lot more than you working for that company. Use your skill set, use your ability and your power to start your own business. So I know we have others that need to talk. So I'm gonna stop there for now. And
Good
come
stuff. To leave behind fact sheets with this is good. Y'all taking notes, right? Okay. All right. I want to stick with the MWBE for a second. So, and Heather, this question is for you because I know access to capital and navigating MWBE certification do remain persistent challenges, right? You lead the state's leading business advocacy organization. So what are your thoughts on one change at the state or city level that would immediately unlock more opportunity for women and minority-owned businesses?
So that's a really short answer, and it's let's streamline the certification process and make it much easier for people to get certified. Shouldn't have to fill out for every different municipality, the state. I do want to just interject for a second, because while we were sitting here this morning, the governor announced a budget deal, which includes a pathway to universal childcare. It's not the whole way, right? It's going to be a project to build the system. And then probably a half hour later, the speaker said, well, it's not really agreed to altogether. But in Albany speak, it means they're very close. So I think that's really, really good news. I did want to interject something about really the importance of MWBE businesses. I mean, I think people may be aware that a large number of new businesses that are created are minority or women owned, but it's really a huge story because before 2020, before the pandemic, it was about a third of every new business that was created. 1/3 was women or minority owned. As of last year, it's half. And depending on who you ask, it's more than half. And those businesses generally outperform non-MWBE businesses by a multiple of 2. So they do really well. The big problem in New York and for MWBE businesses are twofold. One, scaling up is very hard in New York. We are a very, very difficult state to start with your first employee. The amount of paperwork, the amount of regulatory structure that you have to understand. I mean, you really need to be an HR attorney to understand the complexity of it. Organizations like mine, chambers, local chambers, there's some really great chambers in the city, often have programs to help people navigate it because we know like most businesses are small businesses. But the other big challenge is if you kill it, if you get a great state contract and you make a ton of money, you no longer qualify, right? There's a success penalty. You get to a point where you say, well, you don't need our help anymore to be part of this program. So you're no longer a certified MWBE. So we need to get rid of that. We need to think of a purer way to appreciate the contributions of these businesses and not take away the benefit when they do well.
Wow, powerful. Streamline the process, removing that success penalty. Good stuff. I want to tack on to that the piece about, childcare. We know that's one of the biggest constraints, right? On workforce participation, on entrepreneurship as well. What role should employers and business coalitions such as yours play in advancing solutions here?
Yeah. So first, New York's workforce participation rate is very low overall. Women are a part of that. It's not all just women. Improving the workforce participation rate is going to be critical because demographically, we have a declining working age population in New York. And even if we fix immigration and do the right thing and start making an easier path to citizenship and starting businesses and all of that, we are going to have a demographic issue. And people say I'm crazy, but AI and automation are actually going to save our skin on some of this because we just don't have enough people to fill the positions that are out there now. The jobs that AI can do are not the same jobs that people can do. So all of that is really important. But the childcare piece of it is something that, as an organization, we've been working on the Business Council for going on 15 years. I had 3 children in 4.5 years while I worked for the state. And by the way, at the time, the state had no maternity leave for legislative employees. I had to use vacation time. So I brought my youngest to the Capitol the week after September 11th. He was 1 week old. And I got called into work, but he wasn't even old enough for childcare, even if I had it, right? So these are real problems. Employers in traditional hours settings historically were really the shining stars of employer-provided childcare. Hospitals in upstate New York, around the large hospital centers, sometimes the best childcare programs were run by hospitals, but they opened them up to non-hospital employees. And that's because their employees don't work traditional hours. They need to have nearby available access to good childcare. And, you know, frankly, they're very critical individuals a lot of times who they want to make sure if they're going to go do their very stressful job that they have confidence in the childcare that they're getting for their children. The state, through a good policy initiative, blew up the formula with universal pre-K, because that was the age population that made these childcare programs work. The infant rooms, you don't want to have a lot of babies with, you know, very few caretakers, which means it's very expensive. But when you get to the 3 and 4-year-old population, the state says you can have a bigger ratio of kids. And by the way, socially, it's good for them to be around, you know, more than just one other kid. But that basically subsidized the younger age groups, and those business models stopped working. So you have to continually add subsidy into the system to make it work. And frankly, running a childcare center is not usually a business's, you know, objective. It's something else. There are really, really good ideas coming out of industries like Corning. There's a new federal tax credit that has been very overlooked that supports employer-supported childcare and allows small businesses to band together to support childcare centers for their employees. But it's very new, and we need to expand on those. But the answer is you have to make it not super hard for employers, because this isn't their primary business, but they understand, my members understand how important it is. Corning is a member that I would say they are a really great example of a good corporate citizen in terms of supporting local childcare programs and have employer provided childcare. Not every employer is going to be able to do that, but there are avenues we just need to know about.
Thank you. I'm going to speed up these last few questions because I know we're tight on time. I want to make sure that you have time to ask your questions. So Rafi is one of New York City's largest private sector employers. JPMorganChase provides free resources and coaching for New Yorkers to help them achieve their financial goals. You know, it's no secret that financial literacy is critical, but what are the most critical aspects of financial literacy for workforce and small business success? And how do you ensure that those resources are reaching the people that need the most?
Yeah, I would say financial health is not a nice to do. It is a must have infrastructure for economic mobility. You cannot build wealth, and you cannot live in a city that is incredibly unaffordable if you don't know how to manage your finances, whether you're an adult worker or you're entering the workforce or whether you own a small business. And I think part of like the rethinking of how we work with community is also, how do we support the financial health of the communities where we have where we're located, where we have clients, where we want to make sure that people understand what it means to like think about managing finances. So on our end, we do a few different things, particularly that I'm pretty proud of. One is really looking at free financial education workshops and courses for any New Yorker that needs it. And we tailor it to the demographic of whom we're serving it to. So whether it's a job seeker that is in a workforce program, whether it is high school students, or whether it's community organizations that are coming into our branches, we really help them learn about managing a budget, understanding credit score, understanding how to save, so that when something happens in life that is unexpected, it is not going to create like a financial shock for you, right? Like sometimes you get a bill, right, that you can't pay, or like you have a health emergency. Similarly, for small businesses, we do provide a free program called Coaching for Impact. And it's really about those early stage businesses that first need to understand, how do you manage cash flow, right? Like, how do you think about seasonality for your business? How do you build a business plan as you're really thinking about strategic growth? And the way we think about how we are able to reach community is really one, I think, primary opportunities through our community branch centers. So these are not just like retail branches. These are like community spaces where we bring in organizations, we bring in community members to come in. You can take a free workshop. We have local artists. We do pop-up events. We have one right up here in Harlem. We have one in Bed-Stuy. We have one in the Grand Concourse neighborhood of the Bronx. This is really our way of saying we're in your community. We want to make sure that we are able to provide you with free resources. You don't have to bank with us to be able to get these free resources. We just want to make sure that as a good corporate citizen, that we're able to support the communities that we're in and be able to support their financial health as they think about what the opportunities look like for them, whether they're in the workforce or whether they're a small business owner.
Wonderful, wonderful. Wendy, economic mobility requires aligned systems, right? Where are workforce, small business, and infrastructure investments misaligned today? And what would it take to fix that?
Another just really easy question over here. I think that there's a misalignment that's already been noted a bit in the prior question, in that we're looking at very legacy industries. We're training many folks throughout the city, and we're not looking necessarily at what the employer needs are and what the small business needs are. And so one thing, Rafi, for a second, I thought you might have saw my notes, because one thing that we're really looking at is how do we increase participation of women in the trades? How can we support that? But then not just support them getting their certifications, getting whatever licensing you need, but then how do you scale up so that people can then open their own businesses? That is a very high wage business earning model that women do not, for many reasons, I'm sure we all know different reasons why, do not avail themselves of. And so at EDC, we're really trying to look at how we can do that. And so I think the systems are not aligned in a number of ways. I also want to say that when we're talking about workforce and we're talking about training, we're also not really looking at what wraparound services do people need. So people need not free internships with no childcare and no food, right? So we're looking at one thing that Women.NYC does is this Moms Who Pivot program. And they really are very intentional about making sure there's childcare for the moms so they can come. They can learn about the green economy, tech, creative industries. And then they also can take food home with food boxes for their family. And so it's like, I really want to see EDC focusing more on adding English language instruction for people, for back office or back kitchen, so that you can then continue to grow and move in your pathway. So I think it's really misaligned in that there's some intentionality that's missing in making sure that each piece fits together. And one other area I just want to plug is looking at blue highways. There are a lot of jobs open in our waterfront. And if we spend some time thinking about how can we train people so that they can get the TWIC certifications that they need for the Blue Highway programs, women as well, and then we can really match them to these sectors that people are looking for jobs all the time for our waterfront. And so I just urge you to think about the varying, how each piece fits together so that the aligned systems get people to the jobs where they're actually needed.
I love that. Now, my final question is a bit of a round robin. So any or all of you can respond. For the leaders in this room, what is one concrete action they should take in the next year to build a more inclusive future economy? And one thing they should stop doing that isn't really driving outcomes?
I can answer the first one because I think it's easy. Or at least for me, it feels easy. We should all be talking to our council members, state senators about how we're thinking about the city's talent and supporting local economic development. Because the other side of affordability from like housing is actually about how do you support people's earning potential over time so that they can afford to live here. And it's just sad to me that is not part of the conversation that is coming out of the current administration.
Any other takers?
I have short-term memory loss. I almost forgot the question for a minute. Like I wanted to answer, then you answered it and I forgot it. I drew a blank.
Concrete action that they can take or something they should stop doing.
I would say a concrete action is like we have so many wonderful women in here, each doing something unique in their own right. Instead of, and you're listening to all of us up here and all the ideas we have, before you leave this room today, meet your neighbor and possibly try to meet everyone in this room, because everyone here came here for a specific purpose and we all learn from one another. One thing we could stop doing is waiting for information to come to us. You have to go out there and find it in some cases. Like you have to look for it, seek knowledge is power, seek it at all times and in every move.
My mother used to say, smart people don't have all the answers, but they know where to find them.
That part.
I'm going to just do a plug for something that I didn't get to mention yet today, purposely. I think that we should really think about how we can, if there's any employers in the room or even our employers where we work, how can we increase and expand employment of people with disabilities in New York City? It is a huge tapped population that is in the labor force in New York City, trying to increase their employment, to increase their career pathways. There are many programs throughout New York City that people and employers do not avail themselves of to hire people with disabilities. The Mayor's Office of People with Disabilities has a website that has all of those listed. There's the 55A Civil Service Program. There's Partnership for Inclusive Internships, or PII. I might be getting that acronym wrong, but there are many avenues where you can really expand and help broaden that gap.
Wow, that's I could say so much, but I would say my first would be stop allowing ourselves to be divided in conversation. I think there's a lot of times where there are things that we need, and there are people that maybe we don't like, and we think that they should pay for the things that we need, and without regard to the outcomes. And the example that I gave about universal pre-K, I don't want anyone to think that I think that's a bad thing. It's not. It's a very good thing. The problem is there's no ability in politics to course correct and go back and say, how can we fix this so it doesn't undermine what used to be a pretty good system? We need to be able to do that without driving people away into corners. So it's just, I win, you lose, you win, I lose. Politics really needs to be much more about compromise and listening to people who are different than ourselves or that we don't agree with, because most of the time, not always, but most of the time, there's some thing that we can learn and figure out a better solution. And I think the universal childcare path that we're on is a really good one. And I think it's going to be very helpful. It's going to take a while. And I think the impatience that people sometimes have with getting things done in government makes them angry at the people who are actually trying to help. So I guess my big takeaway is just let's stop being divided and start like collectively trying to solve these problems together.
I love that. Thank you. All right, we have a few moments for questions. Does anybody have questions? You want my mic? It's the question mic?
Steal your mic. Hello.
Hello, my name is Chanel, and my question is directed to Chanel or Heather. I'm a proud New Yorker. Both sides of my family date back to New York City since at least the 1920s. And my family has been in America before this country was America. Yet getting MWBE certification has required extra time and money obtaining notarized documents and digging up family records to prove that I am not white. For many generational Black Americans, unless you have the original documents, reissued birth certificates may not include race. And in my case, my parents' birth certificates, they're from New York, it doesn't say race. Meanwhile, if you are non-white with roots from another country, it could be much more streamlined process by simply just showing your passport or your parents' passport. You could also be a white man from a Spanish-speaking country and still potentially access MWBE programs because the process can conflate race with nationality. So my questions are, and I'm still going through this process because I have to go through New York State. I have my New York City, but now I got to go through this. So my questions are, what can be done to make this process more equitable for generational Black Americans? And how do we make sure these programs are actually reaching minorities and not being accessed through broad nationality-based classifications?
suggestion. And this is speaks to some problems in the system, I would say. And I think you're absolutely right. And in fact, I can't tell you how many members I've had have problems getting certification because they purchased a family business from their father or their brother. And ESD says to them, well, obviously you're just faking it so you can get the certification. I'm like, I've been working here for 20 years and now I'm going to own the business. And you're telling me that it doesn't qualify. So there are all kinds of nuance around that. And my answer is going to be frustrating, but is talk to a local elected official because they'll pick up the phone and call ESD. And it'll move a lot quicker. You have to create some friction in the system, a little noise. It shouldn't be that way, but it is.
So I would commit to looking into that for you. Like I said, I was a business owner. When I got my certification, that was one of the parts that blew my mind too. It was like, prove you're Black. And I had to get my parents' birth certificate. And what even blew my mind even further is when I got my mother's birth certificate. My mother was born in 1960 in Maryland, and her race red colored. So that just took my mind to a whole nother place. But that was 12 years ago I got my certification. So to hear today that that's still an issue is a problem. And as you said, call your local elected official. I may not be your local elected official, but I can guarantee you I'm going to go back to my office and look into it.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Saul. My name is Lenore, and can you? Yes, perfect. Thank you all. My name is Lenore, and I lead programs at an anti-trafficking organization. And Wendy, your last comment about being intentional about people with disabilities and how we're thinking that it's kind of like getting to my question. So many women that face economic instability are also navigating barriers like trauma and exploitation. So everyone's not starting at the same place, right? Like I see that a lot in our work. So my question is, and maybe this is for Rafia, or anyone really, but from your perspective, what does it look like for the city or philanthropists and corporate companies to support or fund economic empowerment programs in a way that's truly long-term or responsive to the population versus just focused on, short-term outputs? Because that is important and it's a part of what we do, but we often say this is like long-term and deep work. So yeah, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Loud talking voice in general in life. Yes, you're right. We have to meet people where they're at, and you can't expect a person to really think about, I'm ready to enter the workforce or I'm ready to really start a business when they have other things that they are personally dealing with, because there are things that are just going to be barriers to helping you get to that next step. And I'll say, I can't speak for everyone. What I'll say from where I sit is what we think about a lot is actually around supportive wraparound services, what Wendy had talked about in her comments. So really thinking about when we're working with any type of populations, particularly women, we're looking at a few different things. We have a lot of New Yorkers. Do we have English language supports? We look at mental health service supports. We look at, I don't like to call it case management because people aren't cases, people are people. So really thinking about, do you have coaches that can help you through whatever type of program that you're in to be able to make sure that you're going to be successful, or whether you need more like intentional support to like move through specific barriers. And I think that like every person is coming at a different starting point, but I think you have to think about intentional partnerships of where this works. And then also thinking about like, where do we have free resources where we can provide supports? So for example, like we do like pro bono expungement clinics. We do pro bono legal clinics for women that may have had been victims of like domestic violence, et cetera, as you're going through a lot of like our partnership programs as like a supportive service. But that's not to say that really fixes a bigger challenge. It's really trying to think about like what is the one unique moment in time of what we can do now.
Does that include like by PPM or SPV or loan service or early phase company capital?
No, not directly. I think this was more related to the question around supportive services, but we can talk offline if you have questions particularly related to small business.
No, that's okay. No, that's fine. I was just going to add that one thing that hasn't been mentioned today, which your question just brought up for me, is really around putting resources into metrics. I didn't anticipate when I went to EDC that I would spend, I think, probably half my week talking about data and metrics and really looking at not just when we get someone into the first job, right? What's happening after that? And tracking is a pain, right? It's difficult. It's difficult for jobs to report back. It's difficult for organizations that are funding programs to track, but really building out the infrastructure and the systems so that you can see, okay, great, we have this really good placement rate. What's happening next? Are they moving up in the company? Or the organization? Are they moving to a higher paying job after they've gotten that experience? And so I really think that the next phase of workforce development, and we're already here, we're already in it, is really designing, consistent systems and metrics so that we can see and track how it's working. And so I really, I would love to talk to all the data experts out there offline, because we're really working on this issue.
Hello, everyone. My name is Martha Saint-Jean. I own the Saint-Jean Studio. I'm a small business located in New York. First of all, thank you for this wonderful panel, and thank you to Women.NYC for this phenomenal day. My question is going to sort of sum up what we have spoken about all day, and I'm going to focus in on this word rethinking. And thank you, Wendy, for bringing up the idea of disabilities, because there's so many of us who are living with invisible disabilities that people just don't recognize. And so my question is, how are we rethinking defining caregiving in conversations about economic mobility for many first-generation women who may be living with disabilities or not, who are not raising children, or for women who are not raising children, but who are financially and emotionally supporting parents, siblings, those in their families with disabilities, and all of those things that come with it, who might be stuck in the middle, especially now. And I'm also going to speak as a Black woman watching what's happening with the unemployment rate across the United States. I would definitely tell folks to look up Katika Roy's work. 600,000 Black women are now missing from the workforce. Some people might say now they're jumping into entrepreneurship, but I really want us to also rethink, when do we jump into entrepreneurship, or do we have to reframe the work we're doing? And so my question is, how are we rethinking that for those who still have to connect those dots, or for someone like me who has to live within this hyphenated state of, okay, Haitian American, that's a play on the word, but also the hyphenated state of being a caregiver with intergenerational impact. Thank you.
I think we're all stumped. And I'm always the first to admit I don't know everything, and I don't know this one, but I would say, because a lot of people were nodding in agreement with what your statement was. So I would kind of give a question back to say, what is it? What does that look like, and how can we help you? So I don't know, something to think about. What would you recommend? Like what would help? And I don't know. Have you thought about what is? Oh no! Then tell us. Closed mouths don't get fed. Okay. Okay.
And so, for example, in New York City, people are not eligible for SNAP if they make $300 above some amounts. That's ridiculous, especially if they're caring for people who might not be eligible for certain services or have disabilities, and that is now precluding them from involvement. Maybe I should also run for council.
As long as you're not running for the 21st Council District
Don't worry.
for 2032.
So I think that's one, just really rethinking that, right? We've spoken a lot about rethinking how MWBEs get certified. Chanel, I only had to give my passport. I'm in the process of getting certified. I'm first generation, so that is a different experience. I don't know if it's going to go through, but I understand the process. But even going through that process myself, it was tedious and laborious. So right now, I'm thinking about folks who are really transversing this economy while also facing healthcare shortages, and maybe for their family members, or their family members maybe don't have the education that they have. So I'm really thinking about the community and first gens, right? We talk about financial services. How do we teach them about getting a 401k when you get the first job and all of that stuff? So I'm very involved in the community in that way. I continue to volunteer with first gen organizations. I'm a little bit older now and away from the college campus. However, I am now seeing that there's still so many gaps that I have to fill. And when you're the one filling the gaps in for yourself, that's really challenging. So yes, there are tons of ideas about wraparound services. I would say number one, if we're thinking about, let's say, HDFCs and buying homes, something that I've noticed happens in Harlem, some of those homes are going to people whose parents are able to put down those full down payments for them while they're working for nonprofits and meeting that income limit in that way. So that's a workaround that's now currently happening that we're not addressing. So someone who does not have that full down payment is not able to afford an HDFC. So thinking about the loopholes in the system that allow people to access goods that were not created for certain segments of the population is one thing that I would say that we can definitely work to do, while also seeing where are the gaps that people who actually need help, but maybe they're making a little bit too much. They're making above what they would call a living wage to get the help. So that's the help that I would like to see. And that's what I'm calling for. But for now, I volunteer a lot with first gens, and any advice they need, I say, I made mistakes. Let me help you not to make them. But I also know that I have family members who need my support and help. And I'm going to do everything I can in this season of personal transition while trying to build a business to support and to also make sure I'm still giving out what I'm asking for. So thank you.
You should certainly run for something. Do you know what district you're in? I mean, I'm serious. Okay, there you go. We're going to look forward to seeing your run, okay? Well, I switched now from panelist moderator back to MC, but let's give another round of applause for our incredible speakers and panelists, for the wonderful questions from all of you. Thank you very much. Thank you for being a part of this conversation. I want to say that, we explored this morning economic mobility. We talked about connecting the dots. We talked about precision, right? We talked about how we're going to shape interconnected systems, and solving these challenges really requires all of us working together. Heather had said that, right? We have to work together. I want to make sure that we're thinking about ways that we can collectively solve these challenges, whether you're in government, business, nonprofits, philanthropy, community leaders alike, and honestly, every single person in this room. On behalf of Women Creating Change, Women.NYC, JPMorganChase, Barnard College, and all of today's partners and supporters, thank you for investing your time, your ideas, your energy, your challenging questions into this work. And we do hope that today's conversation continues well beyond this room. Before you go, we do invite you to stay engaged with WCC's upcoming convenings. Please, everybody, take out your cell phones. All right, take out your phones. On Wednesday, June 10th, We will have a Zoom, put it in your calendars. New York's Agenda for Women with Commissioner Denise Miranda. That's June 10th via Zoom. And then on Thursday, June 18th at Barnard College, we'll discuss health across a lifetime. You can find and register for these events and others on the WCC website at wccny.org. You can scan this. This will get you to our website as well. We encourage you to check out the incredible work being led by Women Creating Change and Women.NYC throughout the year. Please also take a moment to complete the post-event survey. Your feedback is what helps shape future conversations such as this one and programming. And finally, keep your phones out. Everybody, I don't see everybody with phones in their hands. Come on, please. Okay, there you go. If you found value in today's event, we hope that you will consider making a donation to Women Creating Change. If I had a hat, I might like pass it around, right? But really, seriously, to support more research, more leadership development, more cross-sectional convenings like this one. You can scan this QR code. You can go again to the website, wcc.ny.org/donate. And actually give a contribution and think of the things that you heard here today and the one thing that you may be able to do. And while you think of that one thing, scan, donate, because you can start with that. That's really our time, everyone. Thank you for being here. Have a wonderful afternoon. We look forward to continuing the conversation with you. Take some bagels, some fruit before you head out. Thank you.